In the very beginning, there was endless light in every direction. For an incomprehensible age, there was nothing but peace, until a shadow began to form. Over 1,000 eons, the shadows grew longer and darker, taking over the light. And for every bit of light overtaken by shadow, the light suffered in horrible agony, experiencing every bit of its own desecration. The shadow's dominance seemed inevitable, but as the very last piece of light was to be consumed, the now dim light fought back. From it burst 5 rays, flying forth into the abyss. The 5 rays each coalesced into 5 forms, and they began to sow seeds of light throughout the shadow. Try as it might, the shadow could not consume these growing seeds of light. And so it sent its own 5 harbingers of darkness, meant to kill these seeds before they could grow. Upon seeing the agents of oblivion, the 5 gods of light joined their power to create the greatest seed of light, which grew into the sun. The sun aided the gods of light, granting them immense strength as the gods of darkness attacked. After a long and vicious battle, sensing their impending destruction, the weakened gods of darkness created the world and attempted to shelter there. However, the exhausted gods of light would not allow it, and with the last of their strength created the 5 first families of man as sentinels of the new world, then retreated to the sky and disguised themselves amongst the seeds of light. The 5 families banished the gods of darkness, who would retreat and hide in the form of 5 moons. Though ages have passed, the gods of light and darkness still influence the world, the light from their place amongst the stars, and the darkness from each of their domains on the 5 moons. Both sides keep each other from truly regaining their strength, with the people of the world managing to cancel out both sides. One day, when all mortals are dead or cleansed of all impurities, one side will regain its true power and end the eternal stalemate. That's the general story in Photism, the primary religion across Melgana. Where the different branches split is in literally everything else. It's generally agreed upon that there are 10 gods. Just for reference, we'll use the Pwirni names for them right now. In Digui, one of the 2 dominant Pwirni branches, the gods of light are referred to as Gufirna Tiforhi, to whom we pray for grace, usually just simplified to the Firnasa. The 5 Firnasa are Jarig, god of royalty, honor, and war; Tiskin, god of agriculture, wealth, and prosperity; Giror, goddess of rain, warmth, and summer; Forwito, goddess of sailing, fishing, and calm seas; and Borerta, goddess of life, fertility, and medicine. The 5 gods of darkness are called Guhersto Tiforhi, or to whom we pray for mercy, or just the Herstosa. The 5 Herstosa are Hiskin, god of conquest, oppression, and slavery; Dinwista, god of drought, famine, and destitution; Kirnak, goddess of frost, cold, and winter; Bunri, god of floods, leviathans, and rough seas; and finally Tixa, goddess of death and pestilence. These gods and their roles are pretty consistent, although almost every version of Photism changes the names and genders around. In Horstia, the branch practiced primarily in the Gallup Peninsula, all the gods are masculine. In Bucur, practiced in Filkti in western Torstia, all but 2 of the gods are feminine. In Wirkoli, one of the least practiced branches, up in Ipiligo, the 10 gods are actually just 2 gods. In some branches you're not supposed to pray to the gods of darkness at all, although that's relatively rare. In Digui, the branch I mentioned earlier, half of the religious doctrine outside of the gods is just nothing more than racism, as it states that the Pwirnis are a people ordained by the war god Jarig and destined to rule over all Melgana. Digui was the state religion under the Third Pwirni Empire, but after the war between the lakes, they were forbidden to ever officially encourage its practice, with the more moderate Belgui becoming more popular. The thing is, nobody even knows where Photism came from. Most branches of the religion state that the original 5 families of man were born in an island paradise far to the northeast, but not a lot of people these days actually believe that. Nobody knows what religion was dominant in the era of rain, but it's assumed it wasn't Photism. You might be wondering, what about the other religions besides Photism? And my response to that would be, what about them? In present-day Melgana, there's only 2 religions that are completely separate from Photism, and they are barely practiced by anyone. Those are Friostem in the Tisha Mountains, and Vilkur on this tiny little island of Dirastrid here. Friostum is a religion with no gods, based on respecting and living in harmony with the mountains, and Vilker is a monotheistic faith that values family and tradition. Both religions are slowly dying, even more than they already have, as most Votists are less than tolerant of these religions. Anyway though, this is just a really short video ranting about some of the religion on Milgana, and explaining the creation myth, so thanks for stopping by. And you're sure this is the right place? Torkin asked. Positive. The charter says the site is just beyond the evergreens, Begrin replied. He'd had to reassure Torkin at least 8 times that he knew where they were going, and by this point his response was automatic. Alright if you say so. It'll be a while before we're able to really get some shelters up, so we're lucky the fire started quickly. The reluctance in Torkin's voice and eyes was clear, though he wouldn't say it again. Hey, guys, how close are we to the border? Esk practically fell over the log on the ground as he ran over. Begrin had known the man long enough to recognize the panic in his voice, and his blood froze in seconds. Something was wrong. Trying his best to sound collected and confident, he responded, "We should be at least a day's ride from it. Why?" "Because there's at least 20 armed Pyrenees riding towards us." "What? What are they doing here?" All of Torkin's doubts and reluctance must have been building pressure just beneath the surface, and his vexation seemed to make the corners of his lips rise, if only for a moment, at the news that he'd been right to worry. Begrin felt a tinge of shame for so callously disregarding the man's concerns. "I don't know. Gadako has the spyglass, and she said half of them have muskets and the other half have spears. What's going to happen?" "Tell everyone to stay calm. We don't want them to think we're hostile. We don't have the arms to fight them, so our best bet is to show them that we're not a threat. Fovik speaks Pyrenee, right?" Begrin forced himself to hold his tongue at his own mention of Fovik. He suddenly wished they'd brought anyone else who could speak Pyrenee. "Yeah, he does. Get him over here. He's gonna have to translate for us. Get all the children into the wagons." "Alright, I will." "Hey, what the hell's going on?" Fovik rushed over in a fast walk that wasn't quite a jog, and yet still belied the invisible anxiety they all had. Begrin willed himself not to explode onto Fovik the second he walked up. "You're going to have to be our interpreter, Fovik." Fovik seemed to wince, while at the same time his face ironed out its subtle wrinkles, as his eyes widened farther than Begrin had ever seen. "To armed Pyrenee soldiers?" The man's reluctance wasn't a surprise, and Begrin almost rolled his eyes like a frustrated child. "It's just a patrol, not a whole army. Just tell them we're here on a charter signed by Lord Stikal of the province of Akana, and we're just settlers. They won't want to deal with us if we're chartered, trust me. They're not even supposed to be here." "Okay, but..." "They're here. They're here!" Begrin couldn't see Torkin, but he recognized the voice by the panic he'd heard just minutes earlier. When he looked up, he saw a group of 24 or so Pyrenees on horseback. Some had spears in their hands, some muskets, while some kept their weapons strapped to their back as they eyed the settlers. The one in the lead started speaking words Begrin couldn't understand. "Just be calm, Fovik. What's the guy up front saying?" Fovik loudly swallowed. He's saying we're on Pyrenee territory, and wants to know under whose authority we crossed the border." "Pyrenee? We should be in Akana still. This is Akari land." Even as he spoke the words, Begrin became unsure. Was it possible they'd gone too far west instead of south? Were these the wrong evergreen trees? Thoughts and anxieties swirled in his mind. "Herkni Ikana he tours Jiren tor de Pyrenee." The man on the horse furrowed his brow at Fovik's words, and responded almost instantly. "He says we're a few hours' ride from Hakar." Anxiety turned to panic. Begrin searched in his bag for the sheet of paper that gave him the right to build a settlement. "That can't be true. Here, show him the charter." He found the paper and handed it to Fovik, who in turn lifted it towards the soldier. "Kilsi hui gu fuerte ga..." Begrin heard the harsh ripping of paper as the soldier took it and tore it into shreds, having barely looked at it. "What the hell? Why'd he tear the charter up? What is he saying, Fovik?" Begrin heard his voice crack as he desperately wished Fovik would somehow know the perfect thing to say. Somehow know the one thing this captain wanted to hear that would make him turn around and leave. "He just keeps saying we're on Pyrenee soil and that we're dirtying the land." Fovik's reddish forehead was shining with sweat, and Begrin noticed the unsubtle trail made by a tear under the man's left eye. "Regular Pyrenee bastard. Fine. Tell him we'll pack up and leave." It's not like we're looking to be under this asshole's authority. He was trying to sound tough, but he knew it wasn't working. Not that Fovic seemed to notice anyway. Guforti Bolnedij. Fovic let out a gasp as his words were cut short by a spear landing in his stomach and emerging from his back, dripping with his blood. Begrin didn't know who'd thrown it, but the damage was done. In what seemed like an instant, almost all of the ponies were off their horses and on the ground, charging into the camp in no recognizable formation. Begrin felt his chest tear open in searing pain as he fell to his knees. These bastards. We said we'd leave, was all he could utter, with nothing but the dirt listening to him. And as he heard muskets fire and familiar voices scream, his world faded to black.